we've been working on this format of basically enriching the lives of patients and caregivers more than from the medical point of view, but from the quality of life point of view. So the first segment that you're going to see for the first couple of hours is going to be from people whose business really, whose personal mission in life, if you will, is to improve the lives of patients and their loved ones, and by caregivers I mean friends, families, and stuff like that. So one of the things that we did is we've been talking a lot about how much of my life, in my particular case, how much of my life do I pay attention to science, and how much of my personal time am I paying attention to as quality of life. And the latest percentage is 5% science and 95% quality of life. Of course, I'm interested to see what drug trials are available and what technologies are available, but that's not how that's not how I live. I live meal to meal and diarrhea to diarrhea and pain to pain and all that stuff. So I've been living like this for 14 years, and of course my situation is slowly deteriorating, but I have a G1. So in my particular case, I happen to be handling side effects exceptionally well. So for instance, I've been 10 years on Afinitor, which is extremely rare. So one of the things that I've been working on has been a workshop, a framework to teach people how to live better with cancer, especially neuroendocrine cancer, as a chronic disease. So I'm going to walk you through what we did in Israel. So I'm going to do a shared screen now, and I'm going to walk you through that presentation. Okay, so let's start. Oh, good. So everything seems to be nice. Okay, so the name of the workshop is Intensive Personalized Program for Daily Living with Cancer as a Chronic Disease. It's a very long term, but Tara Wyand, who actually came up with it, is absolutely right. We don't really have a very short name for it. I call it Pebble, but you will see in just a few minutes why. Okay, so let's talk about our daily reality outside of the doctor's office. So if you don't mind looking at it as 5% the doctor's office, and I'm not really going to talk about that. So what I'm talking about is my 95% of life as a neuroendocrine neoplasm patient. So our reality is this. We have mindset, nutrition, and treatments, and the procedures. This is what I live with. So we all experience weight loss. We might experience cachexia. We might experience diarrhea, nausea. This is normal for us. Now let's look at the mindset. We have depression, inactivity. We have the hermit syndrome. I've seen that quite often. And, the N word in our case is narcissism. And I'm going to talk about narcissism in just a second. So narcissism really goes very well together with victimhood, unfortunately. Family conflicts. We have financial toxicity. In other words, we suffer from financial troubles sometimes. So let's talk about our philosophy. In my work of 14 years, I have discovered that it is very difficult for a patient to live with neuroendocrine cancer alone. It is a chronic disease. A lot of people live a very long time with it. I mean, I've been living for 14 years. Our treasurer has been living with multiple cancers, including NET, for 31 years. There are people in the United States, and I'm sure Ronnie knows, has heard from some of them that are well over 30 years. So let's talk about what's in it for the patient, because it's very interesting. A patient gets a lot of attention. They get a lot of flowers. They get cakes. They get balloons. How are you? How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Would you like some food? Can I run to the supermarket for you? It's a lot of attention. And this is where some of the narcissism comes. And this is where some of the victimhood gets accentuated. Now let's look at the carer. Who takes care of the carers? How many of us patients take care of our carers? How many people who go to the doctor and they get flowers and all that and cookies, how many people ask, do something nice for their carer? And a lot of people don't. So what happens with the carers? They get exhausted. It's very lonely. You have feelings of guilt if you even go out with your own friends. And they get very little compassion. And they hate complaining, because if they complain, then they're afraid of being judged. And when someone judges you and you live with this particular tragedy, it's very hard to actually be there for the patient. And you're going to hear some people talk about how they cope and what their reality is. So Sheila, who's going to be talking very shortly, has an amazing story about that. And I'll introduce Sheila just a bit after Ronnie. Okay, so because of that, we came up with a program, and I call it Pebble, and you'll understand very shortly why. But it is basically the intensive personalized program for daily living with chronic cancer. So let's go to the metaphor. Having cancer, and having chronic cancer in particular, is like being the Sisyphus, pushing up this continuous growing rock up the mountain. Because what happens is that life is not easier. It does not get any easier for you as a patient. So that rock gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the whole philosophy is that the whole philosophy of the program is, how about we turn that rock into something smaller, something more manageable, so we can live with it. It takes a bit of time to get used to it, but how about if we turn it into something that we can put in a pocket? So you have chronic cancer that could be minimized in terms of impact or getting used to it. And you might have diabetes that you live with, or you might have some heart disease, or you might have alopecia. Who knows what you might have? The intent of the program is that all these comorbidities are now becoming more manageable quantities. That's where the name Pebble comes from. So I was mentioning a few minutes ago that it is very difficult on your own as a patient and on your own as a caregiver to do this, because you need someone next to you that is going to help you go through the day. The whole idea being that you are there for each other. And some couples know how to do this, and some couples don't really know how to do this. So our conclusion is that you need to work with a patient unit for mutual support, a spelling mistake, cohesion, and long-term quality of life. Because on their own, you get into situations of conflict, and times get difficult. The environment at home gets toxic. So let's talk about the Pebble program map. So we start with full blood tests, an initial nutrition evaluation, and initial recommendations. In our environment, not this July, 2019, we had 4 couples, and what happened is that they had video interview with our friend Tara Wyand, who's going to be speaking about nutrition just a bit later today. And we started teaching people how to look at the, blood results and adjust their nutrition so that they reduce, for instance, constipation, diarrhea, and such. Then, about a month later, we ran a residential Pebble workshop, and the residential Pebble workshop is actually 3 days in a hotel, and because we want people away from their daily routine, where I, as the coach, teach people how to look at life differently. This is not an indoctrination. There is no do it this way or do it that way. It is a method that I developed, and in this method, you reach your own conclusion. So it's just a methodology of thinking. So after these 3 days, in week number 8, we do we fine-tune again the nutrition, and I interviewed the patient, both the patient and the caregiver. And then finally, week 16, we do another blood work submission, final nutrition recommendations, and the final interview. So I'm just going to let you have a look at it for a second, and then I'm going to move on. So what you're looking at is blood work submission, a coaching workshop, fine-tuning of nutrition, another fine-tuning of nutrition. Okay, so what do I teach? You might be familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, and there is a piece of it that is very easy to incorporate in the daily life, and it has something to do with more conscious planning of the things that are important as a patient and as a caregiver. I teach a bit of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the awareness of how feelings change our language, and how our language changes or can change our feelings. And of course, we have to do a bit of mindfulness. Mindfulness, the way that I work at it is not exactly what you're used to. So you can go and sit by a lake and, you know, do your fingers and then, you know, do all that. I teach a much simpler way of doing this that can be done with very simple breathing and a lot of consciousness. So so what you're going to see next is the evaluation instrument that we used in order to prove to us, first of all, that that what we're doing is scientifically reasonable. So here are the evaluations. We had 4 couples. So if you look at the first couple was already very close together in terms of the way that I'm sorry, patient unit C. Hang on a second. Where's the one that I wanted? No, this one. You have here the patient, and you have here the carer. So what happened is that there were quite intense discussions in that particular couple. So what we wanted to do was to actually get them closer to the same attitude about quality of life. Because when people come together, that means that they actually start having separate lives. And having a separate life when you are a patient and the caregiver is extremely important, because then you can breathe a bit. So let's have a look at patient unit B. Look at the differences here. You have a patient and you have you also have a carer, and look how far apart they are. So the more they are apart, the greater the actual conflict. And look what happened at the end. We were basically in the same place. The same thing happened with patient unit D. And patient unit C, it didn't quite happen. But we see an improvement in the patient quality of life. You can see that the carer basically stayed at the same level of satisfaction with their quality of life. This was actually very impressive. From 65 to 76 was actually pretty impressive because of the research that went into the statistics. Okay, so let's talk about what are we planning to do. So we can do 10 couples at a time. Initial preference is to couples. The workshop can be run in English, Romanian, and Hebrew. And we started thinking about how do we spread this around the world, and the only way that we could find out is perhaps teach in every single country some couples and create a train-to-trainer model. So this is what we're planning to do in 2021 if someone finds a way very soon to kill this virus, because otherwise it's pretty difficult to travel. Anyway, so if you need to make any comments on this thing, on this presentation, on this workshop, I would love to hear your feedback.